So actually, we haven't planned this at all, but I think my talk dovetails really nicely on the back of Ben's, actually. I own a teeny tiny design consultancy called Nexus. We call ourselves a human-focused digital company. Now, I'm not really going to talk about post-digital because I don't really know what post-digital is going to look like or what it means or is it a thing. But what I am going to talk about a little bit is humanity and why I think post-digital is about humanity, and that's largely to do with my values. To start my strange little story, it's probably a good idea to tell you a little bit about me. When I was young, I wanted to be Postman Pat because that's a pretty cool job. He was analog and he was always happy. And that seemed like a pretty cool world. So I remember growing up and thinking I was Postman Pat. Now that never happened. Instead, I ended up doing this nonsense. So, over the course of the last, 20 plus years, I was a designer in a helicopter factory. I never got to deliver the post. I was designing stuff here and blah, 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 and all the way across to sort of setting up my own business, and various things happened to my career. We started doing more stuff with data at some point. And so it was it's been a 20-year journey that didn't make me Postman Pat, but has made me the person I am right now. Now, the other thing that happened, I don't know if you can see this very well because of the lighting, but the other thing that happened in my career, and I would advise everybody to kind of analyze their own career slightly. Oh, there you go. Is, oh, you can't see it. You've cut the bottom of my slides off. There's a patch in the middle of everyone's career called the hazard, right, which is the I know everything, I'm an expert phase. I did see a label outside for Alex Vitti. Is she here? Poor Alex, who was going to be here, she was my boss in the I know everything phase, and I was a wanker. It was awful. And now, in reality, the older you get and the wiser you get, you realise that you really don't know very much at all. And when you realise that you don't know very much at all, that's when you start to become an expert. And I think that's very representative of the industry of digital as well, as we kind of thought we knew it all, and actually, in reality, we don't know anything. And the more we come to accept that, the more of an expert we become. The other thing that happened, at the same time as my, I know everything and this is my career and this is what's going on is, life happens as well. So I track through, everything that happened during my career at the same time. And, I had a new start. I had some trauma. I got into drugs and alcohol. That was cool. But that ultimately led to a fairly dark patch of depression and self-harm and some pretty gloomy times. Really quite anger, and then lots more alcohol. This was if you go back to my original, this is my advertising phase, which was good. That was good fun as well. And then Jesus, I'm confused. And then I fell in love, and then I had a kid, and then I had another kid, and then I left Sapient and had a new start, and then bang, we go to today, and you're kind of like, I don't know what's going on next, because I didn't even have a clue when I was Postman Pat that I was going to be, bordering on junkie 5 years later. And so that's kind of the point. And then in the backdrop to all of this stuff that's going on, we've got brochureware, and I was working in that where blokes were and women were throwing us brochures and saying, can you just chop that up and stick it on this thing called the internet? And I'm going all right. And so I'm coding. And then, then we had to make the brochures wobbly. And so we introduced animation. And then this nonsense happened. And then the smartphone revolution or evolution happened. We all got connected. And so on and so on. So I still don't understand this one. I'm kind of getting there now because of the work that we've been doing, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But really, I think this is kind of the note is, we're in now a period of time, or we've been in a period of time for a while that I'm calling, transhumanism. So, the place in time where we suddenly become more than just us, like us plus our data and everything that's going on around us at the moment. I'm always on and I'm always distracted and I'm kind of hopelessly devoted to my phone. And that's what's going on, right? And the artificial intelligence thing's not something that's going to go away. It is. I know it's a bit fashionable and a bit trendy at the moment, but take it seriously. And the other kind of point about pointing out my career is, I was never following trendy things. It was just happening to my career as it was going along. And bang, in we go. So what is the moral of this story? The moral of this story is very important. I am not an archetype. I am not a persona. I am not Joe B or Joe A or Sarah B or Sarah A. Nothing is set in stone. We are constantly evolving. The only constant is me, and human factors affect everything. So when somebody was trying to design an interface for me in '95, the archetype, I was off my nut on whatever over there. Like, I'm not an archetype, and I think that's something that we all need to sort of take as an industry. What is there only one of in the universe? Shout it out.
Me.
Exactly. Bang. Very existential, but completely true. There is only one of you in the universe. What are the chances of you existing in this room at this time as you right now? One in 102 million, or whatever it is. Zero, basically. The chances of you existing as you right now is zero. That is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. 1-0 to the humans. We are much better than technology, because there is a lot of technology and there's a lot of design, and there's a lot of interfaces, and we've designed it all. There's only one of you, and that makes you better than machines. However, I do like technology. We have cut my slides off, which is slightly irritating, because there's my punchline. I am a tech fan. I'm obviously in technology. I think it's brilliant. Time it took to get to 50 million people, Angry Birds is 35 days. That's pretty cool. And so again, we can't dismiss the fact that technology is awesome and that we've all been part of that wonderful journey. 35 days. 38 years for radio, 35 days for Angry Birds. That's pretty cool. This is 2005, the Pope's inauguration. 2005, this is 2015. Same place in St. Peter's Square. So again, you can't deny that technology has done this really quite incredible, really quite amazing thing to the world. Like, that's part of it. We are still better than technology. I'm about to prove that we are better than technology before we go through some principles of human-focused design, and then a little bit of a case study to try and demonstrate, how we can implement it. So, who can guess what this is? Brilliant, well done. Who can guess what song it is? Whatever. This is concerto number 1 in E minor by the absolutely astonishing Frédéric Chopin. This was something that he composed in 1830. As part of the work that we did on the book, we actually looked at different types of design. I think that composers are designers. 20-year-old comes up with something like this. It's really quite astonishing. I just want you all to close your eyes. And I've got some little people that are going to come steal your phones. Close your eyes, and I want you to listen to this. Really close your eyes. There's some people without their eyes shut. Don't worry, it's not a trick. I want you to listen to this. Oops. Just open your eyes. Who felt that? Do we feel that? Was that to just shout out some words, like what was that?
Beautiful.
It was beautiful, right?
Amazing.
It is, isn't it? Every time I hear that song, I get this this really wonderful, like, spine-tingling moment. It just gets me. I mean, it's astonishing that a 20-year-old did that, and he designed that to move people. He designed that for people to sit in a room and feel it, like, get it. It's just an incredible piece of design. And then actually, it takes you on this journey as well. When you get to the end of that song, like, it changes dynamic completely. It just gets kind of big, and then it crashes, and you sit there and you listen to it, and you kind of feel it. It's just absolutely astonishing. Here's another one. This has been designed by one of the smartest AIs on the planet. You don't have to close. Well, do you want to close your eyes for this one? See if we get the same effect. So this is something, I can't even pronounce the name, Computosa or something. This is arguably one of the smartest AIs on the planet. I mean, really. So I told the AI, I basically gave it the same Larghetto E minor conditions of the Chopin one, and this is the kind of smart AI. This is what it came up with. So, I mean, geez, 2-0 to the humans. That's good. So AI is not, we are unique, computers aren't. Music is really beautiful. Chopin was the best designer of all of us. Machines are trash. And that's kind of why we sat down and wrote the book. That was one of the things that really inspired us to sit down and write the book that came out last year, which was a bit of a philosophical celebration of what makes us human. A look at us in the kind of situation of digital, and as a designer, a UX practitioner for the last 20-odd years, kind of, we're going to go through these technical revolutions. They're going to continue to happen. For me, the only constant is humanity. And, that we're better than machines. So we have to keep coming back to the thing that makes us better than machines, which is humanity, which is our ability to design things that move people, design things that that allow you to escape, that allow you to unwind. We haven't done that all the time, but that was really the philosophy behind the book. I'm just going to give you a couple of key principles that we researched for the book. This is awful because you can't read any of them. We had static electricity over there. So designing for humans really means a consideration of the psychological and the behavioral things that make us us. So for design now, rather than just sitting down with requirements, you have to sit down and consider what makes us human beings. And I think that's a bit of a shift from the way that we've traditionally done stuff over the last 20 years. It's pretty easy to take a set of kind of functional requirements and then recraft those into something that's useful and usable and so on, but is it really enriching us? When we stop and again, you're going to miss number 9, there's a punchline in there somewhere, the 9 basic human needs. Like, when you boil down what makes us people for the duration of our existence on the planet, there are really 9 things. I can't remember what number 9 is, and I wrote the damn book. Freedom. Like support, protection, affection, understanding, participation, leisure, creativity, and identity and freedom. Like, start with those. So when you're sitting down designing whatever it is, banking or service design for this, that, and the other, start with the human needs, the basic human needs. And also try and kind of answer some of these kind of questions. And I know there's a lot of words and you're not going to get half of them, but we'll ask things like, how do we want our product to influence a person's life? Do we want our product to act like a parent or a child? Reframe everything from the point of view of humanity, and you get quite a different outcome. Chopin did not sit down, compose that piece of music, functionally. He sat down at his piano and was trying to work out how to take someone on a journey that would fundamentally change, the way that they felt, the way that they responded to things. How does your product sense and respond to big life changes? now that we're collecting vast quantities of data on everybody, you've got to make your designs a lot smarter to respond to all the stuff that's going on in the world. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. Last year was a bad year for people in general. Our rock stars died, the big orange guy took over, and it's, but we're generating all of that noise, but how much of that is factored into the things that we design? How much of that do we use to nurture people? How does our product help people deal with alienation and negativity? Like, what are social media platforms doing to help people who are affected by the platform itself? People that are bullied on Twitter, like what is Twitter doing about those things? I don't know, but if I'm going to start designing products like that, I'm going to start with some of those things because I think those are the things that really affect people, and that for me is one of the key features of kind of post-digital as a more of a consideration. The best one is right at the bottom, so you're going to miss that one as well. Again, I think we need to kind of update the playbook for design a little bit. So moving from design principles to experience principles, Apple's motif I still apply right now. What do we want users to do? How do we want people to feel? Minimum viable product, minimum viable personality. Optimized journeys to, all talk and no buttons. I'm going to put my slides online so you can get all this stuff because you've missed the best ones. Content-driven to question-driven is something really fascinating, something we've spent a lot of time looking at and researching. Because ultimately our job as designers is to create something interactive, but that changes us, that moves us, that continues to kind of evolve us. Don't neglect the fundamental questions. This is really interesting. This is something called the TheKrebs Cycle. It's in the book. We did a lot of work studying this. I wonder how many design companies include philosophy in their design work. I would argue probably zero, maybe mine, but that's not me bigging us up. That's because we're trying to eat our own dog food. It's trying to be more philosophical about the work that we create is the only way that we're going to move into this conversational UX universe that everyone's talking about. Everyone's talking about bots and everyone's talking about AI and everyone's talking about voice-based interfaces and things like that. You can't do that work unless you have a chief philosophy officer in your business. Because if you don't have a philosopher in your business, you don't really understand the fundamental needs and drives of human behavior. And so I think, post-digital into a kind of a screenless world, we're going to have to employ very, very different types of people to join us as designers. And I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited about this idea of having a scientist sitting next to me. I think it's going to be great. And emotional analytics. So here's a company that we've been doing a bit of work with from Israel, actually. They do something called emotional analytics, cognitive biometrics. They're tracking very much kind of your behavioral patterns. It's not click here, went there. It's, what do we derive from the person's behavior? How do they feel? What's made them do that? What are those external factors? Some really, really clever AI-based work, analytic-based work from some really wonderful people. And so I would definitely go and have a look at Beyond Verbal, they're called. Definitely that kind of stuff I think is going to be much more the things that we're going to need to include in our work moving forward. How much time do you spend getting to know the person interacting with your product from within your product? As a design community, as a UX community, we had to do it. I had to do it. We've always been upfront research, back end, post-rationalize. I think the post-digital world, now that we have an amazing opportunity to use very clever technology, is much more about what we do from within inside our products. And again, we talk about that. So the 4 parts of your digital soul, when we talk about mobile, very much, I think at the moment we focus on the shiny stuff. Actually, I think there's a lot of value in studying the data layer, and that's part of the thing that we did with our business, was to take a lot of time out to really understand the psychometrics that reside within the data that you generate. So all of you with an iPhone are generating vast quantities of data on your phone. There's a psychometric in all of that, and we can use some of that psychometric stuff to learn about your behavior and respond to your behavior and be much more personal, not just personalized. And I think, again, as designers, now that we're generating this stuff everywhere, you have to factor that into the design process. Input. There's an output down here that you can't see. The only way we're ever going to be able to do some of this stuff is to start embracing technology like artificial intelligence. Again, it's not because it's shiny. It's just the only analytics tool that we have at the moment that's capable of taking that much vapor and then translating it into something that's remotely useful for us to use within our products. So again, like, I'm not in love with this notion of AI. I'm embracing it as a tool for us to try and derive some behavioral insight from. A more holistic approach to designing. We use an equation within our business, Lewin's personality theory. Your behavior is a function of your personality and your environment. And that's a very, it's a solid psychological equation, that one. And, so you have to factor in where people are. So telematics as well, given that we're all kind of slightly mobile based at the moment, trying to use things like telematics from within inside your app invisibly is super, super important. You have to know where people are. You have to understand their environment. And again, we're not, as a design community, we're not data scientists. So you can only do this stuff when you're designing with a data scientist next to you or a philosopher next to you. So postdigital is us designing in a very, very different way with very, very different people. We've spent a long time focusing on the ergonomics of our design work. Like, I want my children to look at the stars and not their feet. And so I think, for us to move to a more humanity-driven world, a world where we're not drones looking at our feet, we have to switch off some of the screens and consider, some of the environment and where people are, and encourage people to do much more stuff. Narcissism ID in the megacity. For the book, we spent a huge amount of time actually looking at the effects of digital on people. I spent some time with a lady called Sarah, we'll call her Sarah, who had IAD, internet addiction disorder. I mean, she was kind of 16, and the sickness that was within her because of the internet was really quite moving. And anyone that bollocks me on Twitter about my loathe of the word user, like, I apologize, but this is why it makes me really sad. Because I've met people like Sarah who can't go outside because she can only reside in a world that we created 20 years ago. It touched me to the extent where I'm it's a bit close to a proper user. And so that's why I'm sort of slightly anti the word. So we have to start considering the well-being of the people that we're designing these things for. Like, do we want to encourage sedentary behavior? Do we want to, how much time do we want people to spend, engaging with the service that you're buying? These are things that we don't generally ask at the design stage, the design thinking stage. And these are the things that we need to start asking at the start, because I think you get a very different requirement and a very different product out the back of it.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there? Somebody? Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator, and we need help.
Yeah, like,
now.
we designed that. Like, that's what we've done over the last couple of years, is design escalators. And so, again, just consider the effects of whatever you're spilling out into, Appland or whatever with some of these things. You can't see the nightmare, but we've actually started to reframe the tasks that we do when we start to design stuff into, things that are more human-driven. So is this a task that's an absolute nightmare for somebody? Is this a task that's going to make them kind of, drift off, and it's quite easy to do, it's quite fluid? And again, by reframing some of the design process in a more humanitarian way, you actually end up coming up with some very different stuff. We've started to factor in quite a lot of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, techniques into the design work that we're doing. Again, this is not exclusive to counsellors. You don't have to be a trained counsellor. I'd recommend you spend time with counselling professionals and psychotherapists and things like that. But these are principles that can start to become design principles. So the questions that you ask. I mean, this was YouGov the other day when I was on there. Like, what is that? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? So again, we're just generating quite a lot of fear, and actually what we should be doing is coaching people in a much more gentle way. As the kind of need for an interface diminishes, what happens next? And this movie, I know it's overused. I know it's kind of, it's a metaphor that's kind of everywhere at the moment, but it's actually a really beautiful film. And for me, it's the first example that I've seen of a kind of post-screen world where he gets everything done that he needs to do, and he's nurtured and nourished by technology And I think we can get there. Like I do genuinely think we're on our way, in the next 10 years towards that. So I don't think this is post-digital necessarily, but there's definitely a world where we can get rid of the username and password, the things that stress people out, and get their cortisol levels going up by just thinking in a more humanitarian way. When we start going to that world, it's super, super important that you stop thinking about like the minimum viable product and start thinking about the minimum viable personality. And this, again, is a very different technique for a designer. This is something we've spent quite a lot of time thinking about is, who do you want your product to be, not what do you want your product to be. Start psychometrically profiling people that you think should represent the thing that you're designing and imbue their traits into the design work that you're doing. Like put humans in your design. We've been seeing some really interesting results by doing this with the case study that I'm going to get to in a minute. And then, and again, questions, like always ask a lot of questions. As people, we only really want to do three things. We like learning, we like connecting, and we like having fun. Like that's the thing that drives most people. And so by considering these things again in the design process, the very basic things, which I'm sure most people don't start with in the design process, what you end up doing is looking very much more at the need of the individual. It doesn't matter that there's a lot of words on here. It's done to affect. These are probing Socratic questions. It's well documented how to get people to give you information in a non-aggressive way. Like Socratic questioning is there. It's for us all to use in our design work, and it teases out information. And so post-digital is being more cognizant and cognitively aware of the people that you're designing for and asking a lot of questions. Let them solve their problems. And now we get into this kind of space which everybody's talking about, and I do think has a place in kind of post-digital of, voice interface and natural language interface and things like that. But in order to be able to do this kind of work, you have to understand what makes a conversation. And so you have to stop being a designer of interfaces and start being a designer of conversation and copy and things like that. And it's a very different skill. It's a very, very different skill. So go from your kind of design tools to your books about what makes behavior, what makes conversation, like those very fundamental things. And I'm telling you now, like I did it. It's fascinating as well. Like I'm so much happier as a designer since I broke away from just piecing things into a kind of product-based solution to framing conversations and what do I want people to say and why do I want them to say it and how do I get them to say it. So it's good. It's good for us as designers. I'm going to skip this one because we're kind of running slightly over time, but we found a really nice example of a bot in China called Xiao Ice. Have a look at it. It's Xiao Ice. And it's a really interesting example of how a traditionally conservative culture have really embraced, about 2 years ago, this kind of cognitively driven UX interface type service with a bot. And so again, every conversation starts with a goal, and finishes with a goal, and it's about an exchange, and it's about an action, and you've got to start designing these kind of never-ending loops now of what do you want people to get out of this, how do you want to ask them, what is the agreement that you want to get to from an individual to an interaction, what's the shared language, and it gets quite dizzy like the more you go around it, but when we're creating interfaces that never end, because they're conversations, like that's a completely different mindset. So post-digital is completely different to the one that we know right now. So my last two principles I'm just going to bake into the case study because I think it gives it a bit more context. This is a piece of work that we've been doing for the last year. I just want to introduce you to our audience. So these are the lads, Dan, 21, Abraham, Anish, Ben, and Alex. Fairly traditional, like we know this stuff. They're spending 150 minutes a day on their phones. 150 times a day they're checking their phones. 177 minutes spending on their phones statistically. Most of them have checked social media before they've cleaned their teeth. Again, we talked a bit about that earlier. That's the way that the world's revolving. Spending 80% of their time just in 5 apps, and one of those is a chat app. So again, that sort of validates some of this thinking about this chat-based world that's coming up. It's not all smoke. There is a bit in it. Sadly, they all suffer from a virus that we don't fully understand. It's killing record numbers of men in this country at the moment. It's killing 3 times as many men as women. We don't really understand adequately what's killing them. In 2015, all of these guys committed suicide. So in this wonderful technical revolution that's going on around us, and this, you know, us standing around having these conversations about our jobs and all this kind of stuff, you know, men are dropping like flies. It's 117 suicides a day, and 7 out of 10 of those are men. It's a pretty bad problem. It's killed more, now kills more men in this country than cancer. It's the highest killer of men. And about 18 months ago, this young man, Johnny Benjamin, who's a really wonderful, wonderful guy, sat down with us and asked us the question, you know, could technology have saved one of those lives? Do we think technology is moving to a situation now where it can save people from harming themselves, from killing themselves? And so what we've done over the last year is a piece of work that took all of that stuff, the research that we've done for the book and the kind of human-focused theory, to try and create something that might save one life. And we were talking about businesses with purpose earlier. Like, that's what we decided to do. We decided to pivot my business to one that had a bit more purpose, to take on this project. So kind of my principle 8 from the book is that, you know, we're not digitizing behavior. We are behaving in a digital world. That's post-digital. We're not digitizing behavior anymore. We're in it. And so we have to use that stuff that we created over the last 20 years to help nurture, support, and save people in the world that we've created. So post-digital is taking everything that we've done, using it to its full advantage. So, you know, we asked this question, could AI be the key we need to turn to unlock and maybe save these silent killers? And just before Christmas, we launched this. So we built Sue last year. It's been running for a couple of months. We've been collecting some data. It's disguised as a chatbot. Like, chatbots really for me are just, you know, if this then that. They're pretty straightforward, noddy stuff. This is an actual AI that we've been working on. We've had IBM feed into it. We've had some really amazing data scientists from around the country, and it's really, I've had to question my own humanity during this project, and I think these kind of projects really get you at the core, but also help you inflect, rewind slightly, and look at my career path and those moments and go, like, wow, like, I survived that 2005, like, drugs and alcohol and craziness and depression. Like, I'm the lucky one, and you know, that's pretty awesome. So Sue is really narrow AI at the moment, but what we've done is create something that learns all the time from the data that the test guys that we've been piloting this with, it's feeding off the data on that phone, so the data that's being collected on that phone, to learn about their behavior. And what we've had to do is basically design it as an extension of us. It's like a member of our team and not an interface. And again, that's a kind of post-digital, slightly weird, esoteric way of thinking about things, but by giving it a name, we refer to it, you know, in its third person. By having a personality, we start to nurture it in a very different way than if we were just poking pixels around an interface and things like that. So Sue's been awesome. We started by asking, you know, we still use all the techniques that we had originally of kind of, you know, research. It's the thing that makes us brilliant as designers. We're not just pictures and pixels. We are, you know, thoughtful people. So we started by asking these guys, you know, and women as well, like, what counts as emotional support? What we discovered was, you know, men really just need something that's there. So they just need something that's always around and understands them. And again, this is wisdom that comes out of the thinking that we've been doing for the last 20 years and techniques, but applied in a very, very different way. We did a lot of work on the minimum viable personality of Sue. So we hung out with counsellors and support workers, and there's an amazing organisation called Man Made in Birmingham who we've been doing this work with. You know, Terry Rigby is one of the country's leading experts in male suicide and male behavior, and we kind of codified Terry's personality to work out what made him brilliant at engaging with this audience. And we've put a lot of Terry, in the dialogues of Sue. So Sue's traits really come from Terry. And again, as a technique for design, very, very different. And then we get to some of the really beautiful stuff. So, we were really doing a kind of psychology experiment. And again, I think for design, post-digital, post-technology, really, we have to be thinking more about psychology and less about technology. Because tech's done its job. It's kind of good. It's going to keep maturing. There's going to be different interfaces. There's going to be different data types. But it's done it now. Like, we're good at the tech stuff. We have to get better at understanding, what's going on in there, what makes people go to a bridge and jump off. Like, those really complicated human factors are the things that we really have to start doing. So we spent a lot of time looking at the information that we've been collecting. We also did a bit of an experiment, with permission to our test audience. What we did was, we told 250 guys that have been engaging with Sue over the last couple of months that, half of them it was partially controlled by a person, so they thought that there was a person involved. The other half knew that it was 100% AI, and it's completely autonomous. Now, the guys that thought it was completely autonomous, pure AI, they engaged in less impression management. They got to the truth quicker. They were saying a lot more very open, truthful things. Technology is not as bad as I painted earlier. Technology is fucking cool when it gives guys who otherwise are going to go and do themselves great harm something that they can talk to. And so via this process, we've come up with this kind of metaphor of like centaur design. So post-digital is like centaur. It's like half horse, half man. This is going to be like half AI, half people. Like, we're as brilliant as technology. It's been really astonishing. We're getting some really lovely verbatim back from the kind of test. We're going to do the test for like a year as well. Like, we're not going to let the public in to start playing around. We're just going to let these guys chat away and let the machine learn. So the design, imagine that as a designer, like designing something and then just having to like watch it for a year, like maturing like a good wine in the cellar. Like, that's weird for a designer to do that. Like, I'm a poker. Like, I want to go and like tweak it and like turn it. Now, you got to let this just go and learn and make mistakes, and it is making a lot of mistakes as well, but that's part of the course. Very different mentality to designing. And what we're starting to do now is spot some really interesting patterns. So here's one of the data points from a conversation that we got from one of the guys. So the guy started talking about his alcohol problems. He had a bit of chit chat. I've sped this up, by the way. It says down this like 3 times the speed. He had a bit of chit chat with Sue. He then started talking about his relationships and finally started talking about the problems in his marriage. Sue was able to take his problems with alcohol via the conversations and the Socratic questions that it was firing at this guy in a humane way, from I have a problem with alcohol to his marriage. Really sad stuff. This data went straight back to the counsellors that he was going to see 2 days later, who were able to have a completely different type of conversation with the guy, because for the first time, they realised that a lot of his problems had been stemming from unhappiness in his relationship, things that he had not said to them face to face. Like, this is magnificent. I'm so happy to have designed this. Like, this is designed for me now. The output from those very basic, non-existent interfaces. I'm going to take you through a quick schism. I'm about 10 minutes over already, so I'm going to speed through this last bit. We now hit a very moral dilemma. And this is post-digital. This is the thing that we now all have to grapple with, like the ethics of some of what we're doing. Ethics of our design work, this type of design work, are very, very, very grey. Very, very, very grey. Help before you know you need it. I could use all that data on your phone to predict what you might do. It's getting to that place, which is pretty potent stuff, right? But it's also pretty frightening stuff as well. It starts to, I think, really question not just what we do with technology, but like why we're doing it with technology. We were very graciously given the suicide notes of those guys that were on the slides earlier. This is Laura. Laura spoke to us about her brother Ben, who was one of the guys on the slides. We don't have to read all this. I'll put my slides up for you, but these are, it sounds flippant to say it, and I apologize, but I have to use, it's like the highlights from his behavior the week before he killed himself. And actually what you don't see down here is that he searched best places to shoot on his iPhone. And the reason I put in phone is like all of this stuff was in those packets of data on his phone that I showed you earlier on that little screen. He didn't even check the search links. He shot himself, on the Thursday. Sue, in theory, could have predicted those behaviors there and maybe not got him to Thursday. We also did some analysis just using some pretty basic social media, like off-the-shelf sentiment analysis tools, and a bit of IBM thrown in because they've been so supportive of us. We really looked at the sentiment in notes of people that had committed suicide and notes of people that had threatened to commit suicide but didn't actually go through with it. We only found one difference, and that was sense of burden. So the only difference in the people that did it, the guys that did it, compared to the people that threatened it but didn't do it, was sense of burden. That was it. We got it with the stuff that we use every day to put banner ads online. So like this is like almost when Rory Sutherland and these people are talking like programmatic and all these wonderful, wonderful tools that we've got for marketing stuff. We've been using the same tools for finding the patterns of behavior that could lead someone to an edge. Dangerously fascinating, and ironically, I have this wonderful picture of Rory. I love Rory to bits. He's a wonderful, wonderful human being, and he's making these really wonderful statements at the moment about, people don't, in research type situations, people don't behave how they actually behave. They behave how you think they want them to behave. They're maximizing. They're showing you what they think, and so in a lot of ways, what we have to start doing potentially post-digital is putting our research into the wild, like doing our research in the data that's already being generated to try and get those true behaviors. This is dangerous stuff. This is really kind of ethically, complicated things that we go into now. But what if we could start saving people's lives? Like, what if that's the thing that we need to do in this post-digital world that we're about to go in because it already exists? And what if we could use that data? Last year at Silicon Beach, which is a conference in Bournemouth, we were given permission by the organisers to hack the Wi-Fi the day before I was going on to talk. So I was talking on the second day. On the first day, we had Sue analyse that information on people's phones in the audience. Again, unethical. I'm married to a human rights lawyer, by the way, so we have some wonderful conversations about this. And Sue was able to find some of the ladies in the audience. Sue was able to determine the kind of the guys in the audience, so it can determine, male and female, which is great. Sue was able to look at, people's behaviour on social media the day before the conference and stuff that they'd been doing outside of the conference as well, spying on them basically. And then we were able to do an analysis on the behaviour that we grabbed off those phones, and we found some people in the audience displaying an over-exaggerated sense of burden. We were able to detect some of those behaviors and those patterns using this wonderful new technology that's on our fingertips right now to detect people in an audience who might harm themselves. It gets more interesting. So certainty that person, those people that we scanned, that person that we found with a burden, was an over average risk of harming themselves, like 21%. So AI really works on a certainty scale. 21% that they would actually do themselves harm. Okay, fine. That's not enough for me to jump out in front of them and say, don't do that. This is where it gets kind of interesting, though. Certainty that the person most at risk of harming themselves that we found was a male or not a female, 93%. 93% that the person in the audience that we were able to detect was a man, not a woman. Like, really sad stuff. Take this away. We're not doing anything with some of that technology because it is dangerous. The person sitting next to you right now is a human being. They might be going through a pretty crappy time, so just give them a hug. If that's all digital now allows us, or if that's one of the things that digital allows us to do that we couldn't do a couple of years ago, that's pretty awesome. And so, it's good. It's a good time to be working in this world. So the moral dilemma, just to conclude, the best things in life are free. The technology that I'm describing, the bots are great. We can build the AI. We've built the AI. We're using the AI to have a conversation and collect data. The other side of this, the help before you know you need it, is surveillance. It's surveillance technology. And that leaves me with a very kind of moral issue. especially being married to a human rights lawyer. You know, the Panopticon was a prison structure that was concocted about 150 years ago or something by a philosopher who kind of determined that if you had all the prison cells looking at one tower, you only needed one guard. The problem with the technology that I've been using, we've been creating, is that, you know, I have to scan you all to find that one individual. Sue has to look at all of you, this wonderful piece of design that we've created, has to look at all of you to find the one individual that I might be able to save. Like, that person might be, you know, a friend, a brother, a sister, I don't know. It's a tough one to say. And post-digital, for me, is going to throw up an awful lot of these issues. You know, am I prepared to go to prison to save one person's life? I have had a conversation with my wife about this, and I think I am. I think now that we've started down this path and we've designed some of this stuff and we've used the principles of human-focused digital that led me to, you know, surveillance, like, if it saves one person's life, if my KPI as a designer now is one life, yeah, I think that is worth going to prison for a little bit. But that's me. And so I think designers who start going into this purposeful world have to do so with their eyes wide open, that you're going to end up inflecting quite heavily on what you have to do to get things done. A couple of grown-up charts, quick video, and then we can conclude. You know, we're down here at the moment. Technology is going at a rate of knots to something really quite brilliant. The opportunity looks more like this. You know, to save a lot of lives, we need to do an awful lot of like super AI work. Because it takes a lot of human effort to reach a few people at the moment. The Samaritans and all these wonderful, wonderful people who do an incredible job picking up phones and trying to help people. Like, that's a lot of human effort to save people's lives. Like, the minute we put technology into the equation, we can reach a lot more people. But it does get very Orwellian. These are the kind of companies that are using that same technology in this next phase, post my unknown, like, to sell you more shiny shit. And I go to prison for saving one life. So, like, it's a very complicated world post-digital. This thing that we're about to go into is very, very complicated. Quite wonderful as well. I'm not going to go through this slide because the punchline's cut off. It's in my book. My slides will go up online. We've tried to boil down everything that we've created in this kind of, in the book and in the presentation, the principles, into, I think, a model that best represents what the future of UX design looks like, human-focused design looks like. It's a set of principles. I'm going to finish this with this video. It's only a minute long. I think for us to move past where we are, we have to do some very foolish things. I'm going to leave you with this, and then we can do some questions.
To believe, but it feels like a step in the right direction. It's hard.
This is from a festival in Canada called Sasquatch.
But it feels like a step in the right direction. So be brave with your heart. You are on your way. Every step that you take is the one you're meant to make. Don't be afraid of the dark, 'cause that's where dreams are made. And if they fall apart, it's hard to believe, but it feels like a step in the right direction. It's hard to believe, but it feels like a step in the right direction.
The punchline here is don't do things better, do better things. Post-digital for me is about doing better things. We've just spent the last 20 years doing things better, massaging, you know, interactions and metaphors and paradigms and things like that. That tech's about to go away. the forms are about to go, you know, things are going to change. Do better things. Thank you. I am a fool.
Thank you.